You're listening to JFDI with the two Lauras, the podcast for social media freelancers who want to get more visible, streamline their systems, master their mindset, and make more sales. I'm Laura Davis, and alongside my co-host Laura Moore, we're on a mission to make working as a freelancer easier, because working from home shouldn't mean working alone. We believe relying solely on long-term clients is a big mistake. It means your bank balance is capped and puts your income at risk when a client cancels. We're on a mission to help you avoid the retainer trap, and we want you to build a more flexible business, which means you can make more money without working with more retainer clients. If you're worried about being stuck in the retainer trap, then membership is the place to be. Inside, we give you the systems, training, support and accountability to build out new offers that don't mean taking on more long-term clients and commitments. You get monthly training from world-class experts in their field. You get coaching and support from both us and our incredible community of hundreds of other social media freelancers. And to make your life even easier, you also get access to Hubsy, the only software you need to run your business. So whether you need to send an invoice, schedule your content, manage your email marketing, or set up a website or sales page, we've got you covered. Annual membership costs less than £3 a day, and all the details are in the description. Now, on with the show.
On the show today, I want to talk to you about building a second brain for your AI tools. But before I start getting into it, I do want to let you know that it's a very hot day again while I'm recording. So yet again, I've got all the doors open, I've got the fan on. If you hear anything going on in the background like you don't normally hear, my dog barking, for example, the builders down the road, I apologise. I physically cannot bear to sit in this room with the doors closed for the sake of making the podcast sound better. So I apologise if the sound isn't as you would expect it, but such is life. And when you're a Brit and it's this hot, you have to make do. If only we had air conditioning. Mind you, I'd probably have to turn that off for the noise anyway. Anyway, on with the show. As I said, I was going to talk to you today about building a second brain in your business for your AI tools. And if this is something you might have seen on the internet, you might be thinking, what on earth are they talking about with the second brain? Or you might be coming to this podcast and thinking, Laura, I don't know what a second brain is. What are you going on about? So don't worry, I'm going to get into it all. I'm going to explain what I'm talking about, what a second brain is, why you need one. Social media managers probably need this more than anyone else on the planet. And what you're going to put into your second brain. I'll talk you through some of the things that we do with ours. So most people, when they use AI tools like Claude or ChatGPT or wherever it is that you're using, you go into those tools and you are starting from scratch every single time, telling the tool what it is you want to do. And maybe you give it context, maybe you tell it about your business, maybe you tell it about your client's business, what have you. So maybe you do give the context. If you don't give the context, it's probably why your output sounds generic and feels like actually AI is a bit crap and you don't really understand why everyone's harping on about how good it is. But if you are giving it context and you're getting that good output from it, but you haven't built a second brain, then AI can start to feel really clunky and it can start feeling really frustrating because one day you get something really great, the next day you don't. And some people will work backwards and forwards in one singular kind of chat because they start getting really good output because that chat starts to learn loads of stuff, which is brilliant. But if you listen to our Atomicon recap podcast a few episodes back, you'll know that the chat sometimes starts to go astray. So it can be brilliant. You can be getting great results from it. And then all of a sudden you're like, what on earth? Why is it now being really crap? And it's because a chat kind of works a bit like a conveyor belt where it only has a certain amount of memory. So things will start falling off. So in that previous podcast, I gave the analogy of a chat being a bit like Dory from Finding Nemo, where it's got a really short-term memory. And sometimes it will just suddenly forget something that 5 minutes ago it knew. And it's because of this short-term memory. So a second brain helps with that. It helps with the consistency so that you're consistently giving it the same information. You're consistently getting good results back if you've fed it the right information and obviously you're prompting well. But also it's not forgetting that stuff. Now, In these AI tools, you can put memory in them, but there's a limited amount that you can put in the actual memory within Claude, ChatGPT, etc. And when you're working with lots of different clients, obviously you need the memory to be different for all of those different clients. You don't want the memory from your AI tool that is remembering things about your business to be applied to things about your client's business, because that would just be confusing. A second brain is different. A second brain makes that tool much more usable. It makes sure that it already knows all the context that you want it to have, so you don't have to go and find it all. It can take much more information than the basic memory. So having a second brain is basically the difference between going into ChatGPT or Claude or wherever and starting from scratch versus going in and it being like a teammate. If you think about it like this, right? If you wanted to hire, let's say, a website developer or a copywriter, you wouldn't expect for them to just rock up and be able to build your website or write your copy without knowing anything about you. They need to have the context, right? They need to know who your ideal client is. They need to know your tone of voice. Maybe they need to know your branding. They need to know how you would speak or how you wouldn't speak. They need to know what you want to say. They need to know maybe important links in your business, FAQs. There's so many things that they need to know before they can ever get started. And if they don't know that stuff, they're not going to be able to do their job very well. AI is exactly the same. So if you don't have the right input and the right context, the tool can't do what you want, right? And most people don't do this work, which means that they are accidentally working with a tool that isn't trained properly for them. They don't really understand how to train that tool, and they are basically working with a copywriter who knows nothing about them and therefore can't write great copy. And that's what most social media managers are using AI for, right? Is getting the content ideas, writing the copy, maybe for going onto the website of a client and pulling out content ideas, all of those sorts of things. If you don't do this work to get that second brain built for yourself, but also for your clients, that's why the content that comes out of AI is really crap. That's why people then think that AI is slop. And also, that's why people who are not doing this feel like using AI is cheating, and they feel like they can't charge more for using AI because essentially they're not getting great results from it, but also they're not doing much more work. Building a second brain is more work, but when I tell you it's so worth it, please believe me. We have put so much time and effort into training our AI tools and building out these files that we have in our second brain. And it is time consuming, and it is something you have to keep on top of, and I'll talk about that more today. But because of that time consuming effort, you get much better results from it. And if you're doing that for a client, that's why you should be charging more if you are using AI in your business. And a lot of people think that using AI means that they should charge less because they're getting quicker results. Absolutely not. You should be charging more because you're putting more work in, especially if you're doing this kind of upfront work, and you're getting better results from it. So why on earth would you not be charging more? I remember somebody said recently that it'd be like if it was a builder and they were digging a hole, they wouldn't charge less because they've gone and hired a digger versus if they were using a spade. It's exactly the same. Charge more if you're using AI. I want you to stop using AI and treating it a bit like a vending machine where you're just putting a prompt in and you're getting something out. You need to start treating it more like a member of your team, somebody who you have onboarded, given really great instructions, really great context, and then you delegate jobs to them. Because the people who are getting better value from AI, they're getting better results from it. They're not just better at prompting the tools. Yes, they are good at that, but they have done this boring setup that most people skip, and they keep it updated. So let's talk about what a second brain actually is then. So in Claude, in ChatGPT, etc., you can save information in workspaces or projects, right? You can do the same in a GPT. And what you need to do is to build out this, I'm going to call it a brain, but in ChatGPT or in Claude, it would be called a project. In there, you can add files. So I'm going to talk as if we're using Claude. You'd open up a Claude project, and in there, you can name the project. You can give it some details about what it's for. You can add instructions, and then you can add files. Now, when you then go and start a chat within that project, it is going to read the instructions and the relevant files that you've put in there. And that will give it the context, so you don't have to keep telling it the same thing over and over again. But also, if you are asking something and you're not thinking to tell it, then it knows and it can go and find that context without you ever having to think about it. Whoever named this a second brain was an absolute genius, because quite frankly, I feel like I need a second brain most of my life. There's so much in my brain, and in our second brain, there is just as much stuff. There's so much in there. So you need to, first of all, work out what kind of brains or what kind of workspaces or what kind of projects you need for your business, but also maybe for your clients. So if we think about our business, we have various different brains or different projects. We have a marketing project. We have a customer success project. We have a sales project. I even have a project to help me to manage and find out information and understand things in relation to my mum's dementia. So I have different projects for all of these things. So you need to decide what are the projects I need. And maybe you need one per client, and how you figure these out will obviously be dependent on how you've structured your business and the services that you are delivering to a client. So you're probably going to need at least one project per client, but it might be that you need more than one depending on what it is you're doing. For your own business, you're definitely going to need more than one. Then you need to figure out what is that brain's job, and then you can figure out what you need to put in that brain. So for example, our marketing brain, the job of that project is to help us, funnily enough, when we're doing marketing. So it might be that we are writing a sales page. It might be that it probably wouldn't be a sales page. We'd probably do that in our sales project. But it might be that we're writing emails. It could be that I'm planning this podcast. It could be that we're writing or creating social content. Maybe it's for a reel script or a carousel. It could be any type of marketing that we do in that brain. In our customer success brain, it might be that we are trying to figure out how we could respond to an email. In our sales brain, like I said, it would help us to write sales pages. It might help us to write sales emails. There's all of those sorts of different things. And the reason we'd have a different one from marketing versus sales is because they're different things, aren't they? Marketing is not the same as sales. So we'd have separate projects for those. So you need to decide what the projects are and what is their job, what are they responsible for, just the same as you would do with an employee or somebody who you've hired as a freelancer, etc. They've got a specific job and they need specific instructions and specific context to be able to do that. So what does the brain actually need then to function? Let's think in terms of a marketing brain. It needs instructions for what its job is. So those instructions need to be very clear about what it does or doesn't do. And then it needs the context, and that would be the files. So the instructions can only have a certain amount of context in them, and then the files would have more context. So there's the obvious ones that you would have in a marketing brain, and you would probably also have this in some of your other brains or your other projects. And that would be things like tone of voice, right? So it needs to know how you write. But you also want things like a links bank maybe, so it knows all of the different links that it could go and look at things or put them into emails, etc. You would also want to have FAQs, so things that people are constantly asking or things that you think they're thinking about asking, but maybe they're not asking. So you need to make sure that you answer those without them having to ask. You might have objections in there. You might have details about your ideal client. That's an obvious one. That needs to be in there. You might have past testimonials or case studies. But you might also have things like writing examples. You might include your 10 best emails or your 10 best Instagram posts, those sorts of things, so it has the context for what good looks like for you. You might have rules about don't do this, don't do that, because this sounds like AI. So we have a whole file in ours, which is anti-AI rules, right? So you need to think about all of the different information that you want to put into these files. And you want to have lots of different files because you don't want Claude to have to go and read through all the files to get the information. You want it to be able to know, oh, okay, this one is really obvious that this is FAQs. Maybe I should go and read that. This one's really obvious because it's got case studies in there and I'm looking for a case study. I'll go and read that, etc. So you put them into separate different files. Now, where do you store these files? Of course, in Claude, they're literally text. So you would literally write the text in there. But you want to be really organised and really clever. So don't just write the text in the file. We keep ours in Notion. For years and years, I have been so anti-Notion because I just couldn't really understand what the whole fuss was about Notion. Now, I see Notion as a useful storage for documents. So text-based information goes into Notion for us, and it's all of our AI stuff. It's all kept in Notion. You could put this in a file in a Google Drive, in your Dropbox, wherever it is. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that these files are really well organized because they're going to need updating. So these files and this second brain is only as good as what you feed it. And what you feed it today might be accurate for today, but next month something may have changed. And it may be that whilst you're working within these projects or these second brains, that you find actually it's not giving you as great results as you want because you've forgotten to tell it something. So you tell it and then you want to go and update those files. So this is why I love Notion for doing this, because in Notion, we've got a whole database of these files and they have the date that they were last updated. We've got a version number so we can make sure that we've got the right version in our Claude projects. But we've also got the tag so we know which project these files are in, because some of these files will be in more than one project. Your tone of voice file, for example, is not just going to be in your marketing project. It might also be in your sales project. It might also be in your customer success project, for example, right? So you want to make sure that you know exactly where these files are so that when you update one, you can go and update them all. So that's really important. That's why I like Notion, because it's way easier to do that in Notion than it is anywhere else. Now, you also know that I am a massive fan of Airtable. We use Airtable day in, day out, but I wouldn't use Airtable for this because this is very much just a text file, a markdown file, and Airtable's no good for that. Airtable is brilliant for data, but this isn't data as such. This is text. So it's much better to be somewhere like Notion or Google Docs, etc. But you want to make sure wherever you're putting it, you can be organised. Okay. Now, what's really important for me to say is that if you've never done this work before, to go and write down your brand voice or write down your ideal clients because it's all in your brain, that's totally normal. Most freelancers have never done this work because they don't need to. They don't need to go and tell somebody else. But when they then get to the stage of having to outsource, it's quite difficult to get all of that out of your brain. I have to tell you, you are now at that stage. Even if you're brand new to being a freelancer, you are at that stage because you now have somebody who you can outsource some work to. And that somebody is Claude or ChatGPT. And of course, you can outsource to humans still. And maybe at some point in your business, maybe not today, but maybe in 6 months, a year, what have you, you will do that. If you do this work now, outsourcing to a human is going to be so much easier because you've got all this information you can just hand over to them. And you can say, oh yeah, you want my tone of voice? Here you go, here's the document. You want to know about my ideal client? Here you go, here's the document. Oh, these are the FAQs I get. Read this document. And you don't have to spend 2 hours trying to explain something to somebody and then realise, oh God, I didn't tell them this. You can literally just hand over these documents. Honestly, your life is going to be so much easier when you do this. But it is something you have to put the time into, and you have to try and work out what it is you need. And of course, Claude or ChatGPT can totally help you. You can literally go into these tools and say, I want to build a marketing brain. What files do you think I should have in there? And it will tell you. And you can say to it, okay, in what format do you think you need my FAQ file? And what FAQs do you think my ideal client might have? And you can work with these tools to build out these files. But it does take time. Don't expect to go and do this all at once. It's taken us so many hours to do this work. I can't tell you, so much time. And there's 2 of us. We can split this out. But it still takes a lot of time. And we're still adding things in. Even just yesterday, I was like, oh, I've just thought of a really good file that could go into this workspace. And I spent time building it out. And so it is something you're going to keep doing. But what you really need to make sure that you do is that you continue to update these. The more you update these files, the better they will be, the better results you're going to get from your AI tools. The goal isn't for AI to do your job. The goal isn't for AI to take over from a human. The goal is to help you to get better results, to take the things off of your plate that are draining you, to do the things that you can't think about to help you with that strategic thinking, or to free up your brain space so you can do that strategic thinking. So I'm not saying that you're going to build this second brain and AI is going to take your job or it's going to take over. It's going to help you. You are still the marketer. You are just in charge now of a new team member. This is somebody who is on your team. And if you start to think about these AI tools as part of your team, you're much more likely to give them what they need to do a good job for you. I love talking about all this stuff. You probably know that already. Me and Laura are like truly in our AI era. It's something we want to talk more about in the membership, etc. If you're not already in the membership, do consider getting onto the waiting list. We're going to be definitely talking about more things in relation to AI in there over the coming months. But if you've got questions specifically about this second brain thing, come and drop us a DM. We're on Instagram all the time, and we're more than happy to chat about this stuff. This stuff at the moment is what's keeping my brain going. I feel like maybe I need a second brain just for all the thoughts I have about AI. But honestly, it's making things so much easier in our business. Yes, some things it's making harder because we're like, oh my God, we could do this. And then that adds more things to our task list. But it's also helping us have much more clarity, because the AI tools can pick all these things out that are spread around our business and pull them together and say, yeah, but this is why this is happening, because you haven't thought of that thing. And we're like, oh my God, of course that's why. But because everything's scattered around in a human brain and an AI doesn't have the emotion, the distractions, etc., it's much easier for it to look at all of that information and give you better answers. If you do one thing this week, just have a think about what second brains could you create, and start thinking about what you could put into those files in those workspaces. If you've enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you would leave us a review. Reviews really help us to get this podcast seen by more people, and we love helping social media managers, so we really would love to get this podcast into the ears of more social media managers. Please consider leaving us a review wherever it is you're listening, or drop us an email with a review that we can share on our socials. We'll be back again really soon, and yeah, we'll see you then.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of JFDI with the two Lauras. If you want more support, strategy and systems to run your social media business, join our membership. You can sign up at thetwolauras.com/membership, and make sure you follow us on Instagram at thetwolauras and visit our website thetwolauras.com for more advice and support. Thank you so much for being part of our community. See you on socials.